James, why did you sell my car without even asking me? I stood in our brightly lit kitchen, gripping the edge of the countertop. James was lounging on the couch, phone in hand, barely looking up as I spoke. Emma, I told you last week. We needed the money, James replied casually. His voice was indifferent, almost bored. The money? For what? My voice was rising, my patience wearing thin. For the new entertainment system. You saw how outdated the old one was. We deserved an upgrade, James said with a shrug, his eyes glued to a video on his phone. That car was important to me, James. It wasn't just about the money. It was mine. My voice cracked, and I took a deep breath, remembering my grandmother's advice to keep my inheritance secret. I never thought I'd need to follow it so strictly. James finally looked up, his expression a mix of irritation and nonchalance. Come on, Emma, it's just a car. We can get you another one later. I shook my head, frustration boiling over. You didn't even bother to ask me. This isn't just about the car, James. It's about respect and consideration. You can't just make decisions like this on your own. Our suburban home, usually a tranquil retreat, now felt stifling and alien. The neighborhood outside was quiet, with children playing in front yards and neighbors chatting over fences. To the outside world, we were just another happy couple in a tight-knit community. But inside, the cracks were growing deeper every day. James finally set his phone down and stood up, walking towards me. Emma, you're overreacting. It's not like we're broke. I'll buy you another car. End of discussion. His dismissive tone cut through me like a knife. I looked at him, searching for the man I'd married, the man who had once been attentive and kind. But all I saw was a stranger, someone who was slowly bleeding me dry of patience and trust. End of discussion? I repeated, incredulous. You can't just dictate how this goes, James. You've crossed a line, and you don't even see it. James's eyes narrowed. What's really going on here, Emma? You've been acting distant for months. Is there something you're not telling me? I took a step back, realization dawning. My grandmother's advice echoed in my mind. Now, more than ever, I understood why she had been so adamant. Protecting my inheritance wasn't about the money itself. It was about keeping control over something that was truly mine, especially when everything else seemed to be slipping away. I don't know, James. Maybe it's because you've stopped caring about what's important to me, I said quietly. Or maybe it's because you think you can just bulldoze through this marriage, making decisions that suit only you. James scoffed, shaking his head. You're being dramatic. I'm just trying to improve our lives. Your life, I corrected. Improving your life at my expense. He didn't respond, just stared at me with a mixture of frustration and confusion. I realized then that he truly didn't see the problem, or maybe he didn't want to. Either way, it was clear that something had to change, and fast. As James turned back to his phone, dismissing the conversation, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I wasn't going to be sidelined in my own life. Grandma's wisdom was a guiding light, and it was time I started listening to it more carefully. Tension hung heavily in the air as I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding. One thing was certain. I wasn't going to let James's betrayal define me. This was only the beginning, and I had my own plans to make. Claire, I don't know what to do anymore, I said, dropping onto her couch. The floral print cushions smelled faintly of lilac. Claire looked up from her magazine, instantly concerned. Emma, what happened? Did James do something again? I sighed heavily, running my fingers through my hair. He sold my car without even asking me, just traded it for some stupid entertainment system. Claire's eyes widened in shock. Seriously? Who sells someone's car without asking? That's insane. Yes, and he acted like it wasn't a big deal, just brushed it off like I was overreacting. My voice wavered as I recounted the morning's confrontation. He's been doing this for a while now, hasn't he? Claire asked softly. I nodded. It didn't start this way. When we first got together, he was so kind, so attentive. I felt like I was the center of his universe. But now, I let the sentence hang, unfinished. Claire squeezed my hand reassuringly. Have you thought about leaving him? You don't have to stay in a situation like this, Emma. I bit my lip, hesitating. I have, but it's complicated. We've built a life together, and it's not easy to just walk away. Claire's face was etched with concern. You have to do what's best for you. Always remember that. Later that evening, as I cleaned up the dinner dishes James had left behind, I started thinking about the early days of our relationship. I remembered the picnics in the park, the surprise weekend getaways. He used to plan everything so meticulously, making sure every moment was special. But that James was long gone, replaced by someone who seemed to care more about his gadgets and parties than about me. While scrubbing the last of the pots, I noticed the flashy new entertainment system taking up half the living room. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through James's social media. My heart sank when I saw the photos of his recent parties, extravagant and filled with friends I barely knew. Numerous gadgets cluttered our home, all bought with the money he got from selling my car. I fumed silently, deciding to confront him again when he came home. The door creaked open as James stumbled in, the smell of alcohol clinging to him. "James, where have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed drunkenly. "Out with the guys, needed a break, you know?" I took a deep breath. "I saw the photos, all those expensive gadgets and parties. Is that where the money from my car went?" James looked at me, his eyes unfocused. "Come on, Emma. Don't start with this again. It's just stuff. We're having fun." "Fun, without considering my feelings?" I snapped. "This is beyond disrespectful, James, that you're ignoring everything I care about." James rolled his eyes, slumping into the couch. "Why don't you ever chill out? You used to be fun." Tears of frustration stung my eyes. "This isn't about fun, James. It's about you taking everything I care about and tossing it aside." He didn't respond, eyes already closing as he passed out on the couch. The sound of his snoring filled the room, but it couldn't drown out the anger and hurt simmering in my chest. I stood there for a moment, looking at the man who once promised to cherish me. Claire's words echoed in my mind. Maybe it was time to make a change, to find the strength Grandma had always believed I had. This betrayal wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of something new, and I was ready to fight for the life I deserved. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, phone in hand. I needed to talk to my parents. I dialed my mom's number and waited. "Emma, sweetheart, how are you?" My mom answered, her voice warm and comforting. "Mom, things with James, they're worse than ever," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, honey, what happened?" she asked, her tone immediately concerned. I quickly explained the car situation and James's ongoing disregard for my feelings. "I'm considering divorce, Mom. I can't do this anymore." There was a pause on the line. "Emma, we've always supported you, no matter what. Your father and I will help you through this. And remember, you have your inheritance." "I know, Mom. I might need to use it to move out and start over," I admitted, feeling a small twinge of relief saying it out loud. "We'll support you, darling. Do what you need to do," she assured me. As I ended the call, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. It was time to take action. I started drafting an email to a lawyer, seeking advice on the next steps for divorce and considering apartments in a nearby town. After a few hours, I felt more determined than ever. That evening, I kept my phone close, anticipating a reply from the lawyer. As I sat on the couch, James entered the room, eyes suspicious. "What have you been doing all day?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "Just sorting some things out," I replied, keeping my answers vague. James eyed my phone. "Who were you talking to earlier?" "Mom, I needed some advice," I said, avoiding his gaze. Before I knew it, James snatched my phone from my hand. "What the hell, James? Give it back!" I yelled, lunging after him. He scrolled through my messages, his face darkening. "Thinking about leaving me, huh?" His voice was laced with anger. "Give me my phone, James, now." My voice was firm, even though my heart was pounding. James's eyes flashed dangerously. "You think you can just run away with that little inheritance of yours? Everything should go to us, not just you. You've been hiding it all this time?" My mind raced. "I didn't have to tell you everything. That money was meant to give me security." "You're gonna use it to get away from me?" He spat, stepping closer. I stood my ground. "Yes, James, if that's what it takes. I'm done." He threw the phone on the couch, stepping back, but his expression was still livid. "You won't get far with that money. You owe me, Emma. We're in this together." "We were in this together, James. You're the one who turned it into something else," I said coldly. James stared at me, seething, before storming out of the room, slamming the door behind him. My hands were shaking, but I felt a rush of determination. This couldn't go on any longer. I had my plan. I was going to make it out of this mess one way or another. The email dinged, signaling a new message from the lawyer. I quickly opened it and read through the advice, solidifying my resolve. It was time to take the next step. I packed a small bag with essentials, calling Claire to give her a heads up. She answered on the first ring. "Claire, can I stay with you for a while? I'm leaving tonight." "Emma, of course. Come right over. We'll figure this out together," Claire said, her voice unwavering. Grabbing my bag, I took one last look around the house that had become more a prison than a home. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. I arrived at Claire's house, still gripping the small suitcase. Claire opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug. "You did the right thing, Emma," she whispered. "Thanks, Claire," I replied, stepping inside. We sat down in her living room, the warm ambiance a stark contrast to the cold tension I'd left behind. "So what's the plan?" Claire asked, handing me a cup of tea. "I contacted a lawyer. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a new place and a job. I need to be independent, both emotionally and financially," I explained, taking a sip. Claire nodded. "You know you can stay here as long as you need to. We've got this." The next morning, I woke up early, ready to tackle my to-do list. Claire drove me around town, helping me check out apartments. We found a cozy one-bedroom that felt just right. I put down a deposit and scheduled a move-in date. Later, I sat at Claire's kitchen table, laptop open, applying for jobs. The task was tedious but necessary. It wasn't long before emails and phone calls started coming in. By evening, I had lined up several interviews. As I celebrated these small victories with Claire, my phone rang. It was James. My heart raced, but I answered. "Emma, where are you?" he demanded, his tone aggressive. "That's none of your business," I said, trying to stay calm. "It is my business. We're married. You can't just walk out," he barked. "I had to. You left me no choice," I replied firmly. James scoffed. "You think you're brave now, hiding at Claire's? This is our problem, not hers. Tell me where you are." "I'm not hiding, and it's not just Claire's problem. I'm done being treated like I don't matter," I said, my voice steady. "You owe me, Emma. For the mortgage, the bills, everything. You think you can just run off with your inheritance and leave me to deal with everything?" His desperation was palpable. "This isn't about money, James. It's about respect, or your lack of it," I said, tears filling my eyes. "You'll regret this, Emma," he hissed before hanging up. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. Claire looked at me, concern etched on her face. "He won't stop, will he?" she said softly. "Not easily," I admitted, steeling myself. The next few days flew by in a blur of apartment preparations and job interviews. I felt stronger each day, my resolve hardening. One evening, while I was organizing my new apartment, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from James. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll come crawling back. They always do." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I typed back quickly. "No, James, I'm done crawling. This is my life now." I hit send and blocked his number. Standing by the window, I watched the sun setting over my new neighborhood, feeling a sense of freedom. The next morning, I went to my first job interview. Walking into the office, I was greeted by a friendly receptionist who led me through the process. The interview went well, and I left feeling hopeful. Returning to my new apartment, I found Claire waiting with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "To new beginnings," she toasted, handing me a glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking glasses. As we sat and talked, I realized I was beginning to reclaim my life. Each step forward was a step away from James and his toxic influence. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all I'd left behind and everything that lay ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. A week later, I got the call offering me the job. I smiled, tears of joy streaming down my face. It was a sign that I was on the right path. I was building a new life, one step at a time, and it was a life where I mattered. The town's annual fair was in full swing. Kids sprinted between booths, their laughter mingling with the cheerful hum of the crowd. I was helping Claire set up her jewelry stall when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Emma," Jack's familiar voice greeted me. He was a mutual friend, someone dependable who'd always been kind. "Oh, hey, Jack, how's it going?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Pretty good. But hey, I heard about you and James. Are you okay?" Jack's concern was evident. I sighed. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it. Jack nodded, but his face turned cautious. Speaking of James, he's here. And, well, he isn't handling things well. Before I could ask what he meant, a loud commotion drew our attention. James was in the middle of the fairground, visibly intoxicated, shouting at a group of young men gathered around a barbecue pit. "Oh no," I whispered, feeling my stomach knot. "Hey, it's none of your business!" James yelled, pushing one of the men. The crowd's murmur grew louder, eyes turning toward the spectacle. I took a deep breath. I need to handle this. "Emma, are you sure?" Claire asked, worry etched on her face. "I have to," I replied, squaring my shoulders and weaving through the crowd. As I approached, James spotted me and stumbled over. "Emma, there you are. Thought you could avoid me forever?" He slurred, his breath reeking of alcohol. "James, you're making a scene. Let's talk somewhere else," I urged, trying to stay calm. He laughed bitterly. "Why? So you can walk out again? You think you're so much better now?" "James, you're drunk. This isn't the place," I said firmly. "Everyone should know how you abandoned your husband," James shouted, his voice carrying over the crowd. I could feel the eyes of the townsfolk on us, the whispers spreading like wildfire. Anger and embarrassment churned inside me, but I wouldn't let him drag me back down. "James, we're done. You need to accept that," I said, my voice steady. "Now please, go home before you make this worse." "Worse? You think this can get worse?" His eyes were wild, unhinged. "You owe me, Emma. You can't just walk away without paying your dues." "I don't owe you anything, James. I'm done being your pawn," I replied, stepping back as he moved closer. A friend intervened, grabbing James by the arm. "Come on, man. Let's get you out of here." James struggled, but was eventually pulled away, his furious eyes locked on mine. "You're going to regret this, Emma." As he was dragged off, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Claire appeared by my side, her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "Yes, it had to be done," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. We continued setting up the stall, the mood around us slowly returning to normal. But I noticed several sympathetic looks from people who'd witnessed the altercation. Hours passed and the fair wore on, becoming a blur of faces and activities. That evening, after packing up, I drove to my new apartment. Walking in, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. I was finally free of James's constant manipulation, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. I spent the next few days settling in, gradually feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. One morning, I walked over to the mirror in my new bedroom and caught my reflection. There was a spark in my eyes, one that had been missing for a long time. This was my life, my space, and my chance to rebuild. The memory of James's public meltdown was still fresh, but it only fueled my resolve. I was moving forward, and nothing he did would pull me back. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. Today was just another step, and step by step I was reclaiming my future. One morning, a week after the fair, I was getting ready for my first day at the new job when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. "Emma, can we meet up? There's something you need to know about James." My curiosity piqued. I agreed to meet him at the local coffee shop after work. The day passed quickly, filled with training and meeting new colleagues. By evening, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. At the coffee shop, Jack was already waiting with 2 drinks. He waved me over, his expression serious. "Thanks for coming, Emma," he said, sliding one of the cups over to me. "No problem, Jack. What's going on?" I asked, taking a sip. Jack took a deep breath. "James lost his job, the company downsized, and he was let go." I blinked in surprise. "I didn't know that. He hasn't contacted me since the fair." "Yeah, he's not taking it well," Jack continued. "He's been telling people you left him at the worst possible time, trying to play the victim, but there's more." I leaned in, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" "He's planning something, Emma. He told a mutual friend he's going to try to win you back so he can get his hands on your inheritance." Anger flared inside me. "He really thinks he can manipulate me again?" Jack nodded. "He's desperate, Emma. You need to be careful." "Thanks for the warning, Jack. I'll stay vigilant," I said, my resolve hardening. As I walked back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. James losing his job changed things, making him more unpredictable. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, my mind racing. I needed to be prepared for whatever scheme he cooked up. The next few days were a whirlwind of work and settling into my new routine. One evening, as I was organizing my closet, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated, peering through the peephole. It was James. "Emma, open up. We need to talk," he called, his voice shaky. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door slightly, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, James?" He looked disheveled, clearly stressed. "Emma, I'm sorry for everything. I've lost my job. I need your help." "You need my help," I repeated, incredulous. "After everything you've done?" "Please, Emma, we can work this out. Think about what we had," he pleaded, trying to sound genuine. "What we had, James, is over. You made sure of that," I replied firmly. His demeanor shifted, his eyes flashing with anger. "You can't leave me like this. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," I said, slamming the door shut and locking it. I could hear James banging on the door, shouting, but I leaned against it, breathing deeply. After a few minutes, the banging stopped, and I heard him leave. I checked the peephole to make sure he was gone before calling Claire. "Emma, what's wrong?" she asked, hearing the panic in my voice. James showed up at my apartment. "He's acting desperate and unhinged," I explained. "Stay calm, Emma. You need to protect yourself." "Consider getting a restraining order," Claire suggested. "I'll look into it." "Thanks, Claire," I said, feeling a bit more anchored after talking to her. The next morning, I called the lawyer to discuss my options. He advised me to document everything and start the process for a restraining order. I followed his advice, keeping a log of every interaction with James. Days turned into weeks, and I focused on building my new life. One afternoon, while taking a break at work, I saw a familiar face across the street. It was James, watching me. My heart pounded, but I straightened my shoulders and continued with my day. This was my life now, my chance to be free. No matter how desperate James became, I wasn't going back. This was about reclaiming my future, and I was determined not to let him take that away from me. The moment I stepped out of my building, I saw James sitting on a bench across the street. His eyes locked onto mine, and he stood up, walking towards me. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. I quickened my pace, determined not to engage with him, but he caught up to me before I could reach the corner. "Emma, wait," James called out, reaching for my arm. I yanked my arm away, anger flaring. "What do you want, James? I've told you it's over." "Just hear me out," he pleaded, desperation clear in his voice. "I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's been hard without you. We can make this work again." I stared at him, incredulous. "You really think I'd come back after everything? You manipulated, lied, and used me. There's nothing left to fix." James looked around, a flicker of anger passing over his face. "We were married, Emma. That means working through the tough times." "I did work through the tough times, James, alone, while you partied and spent money you didn't have," I shot back, feeling a rush of righteous indignation. A passerby slowed down, eyes widening at the commotion, but I stood my ground. The whole world might as well know what I've been through. James's posture shifted from pleading to confrontational. "You want people to think I'm the bad guy? You've been hiding money, living this new life while I'm struggling." "Living this new life isn't easy, but it's necessary," I said, trying to keep calm. "I need peace, James, something you can't seem to offer." His eyes darkened. "You think you're better than me now?" "No, James. I think I deserve better than how you treated me," I replied, turning to walk away. James grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. "This isn't over, Emma. You're not getting rid of me that easily." "Get your hands off me," I yelled, drawing the attention of more bystanders. James's grip loosened, but the venom in his eyes remained. A tall man in a suit stepped forward. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, eyeing James warily. "Yes, thank you," I answered quickly. "I was just leaving." James glared at the man, but took a step back. "This isn't over," he repeated, his voice low and threatening. Ignoring his parting words, I hurried away, my heart pounding. This encounter couldn't scare me into submission. It only made me more resolute. Back at my apartment, I immediately called my lawyer. "James is stalking me. I need to escalate this. What are my options?" "We can file for a restraining order immediately," he replied. "Document today's incident in detail and we'll proceed." Hours later, while I completed the necessary paperwork, a sense of empowerment washed over me. Finally, action was being taken to protect my newfound peace. The next week passed without incident until I received a call from an unknown number. My heart sank when I heard his voice again. "Emma, you think a piece of paper will keep me away? You have no idea what I'm capable of," James hissed before the line went dead. Trembling with a mix of fear and fury, I called the police and reported the threat, adding it to the growing case against him. This pattern of intimidation and control would end here. A day later, Claire called me with surprising news. "Emma, people are talking. They know about James's behavior. He's losing friends and support left and right." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of vindication. "He's finally getting what he deserves." As I hung up, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. James's grip on my life was weakening. The community was seeing his true colors, just as I had. I stood by the window, looking out at the bustling evening street below. My journey towards freedom was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. James's fall from grace had begun, and I was reclaiming my future one step at a time. Weeks had passed, and life was slowly returning to a semblance of normal. I was flourishing at my new job, finding satisfaction in the work and camaraderie with my colleagues. Evenings were filled with laughter and support from Claire, who had become my rock. One afternoon I was engrossed in crafting a presentation when my phone buzzed. It was from Jack. "Hey, Emma, are you free to meet for coffee later? Something you should know." My curiosity piqued, I agreed. We met at the little cafe by my office. Jack was already there, looking concerned. "Emma, thanks for meeting me," he greeted, gesturing to the seat across from him. "No problem, Jack. What's going on?" I asked, sitting down. "It's about James. He's not doing well. He's been trying to get people to turn against you, but it's backfiring. People see him for what he is now," Jack explained. Relief washed over me. Good, he needs to face the consequences. But there's more. James got into some trouble with the law. Drunk driving. He's lost even more support, Jack continued. I nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pity. "Thanks for telling me, Jack. I needed to hear that." After our coffee, I decided to take a walk through the park. The cool breeze and the rustling of leaves felt liberating. It was here I bumped into James, looking disheveled and defeated. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, his eyes darkened. "Well, look who it is," he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. "James, please. I don't want any trouble," I replied, keeping my distance. "You've ruined everything for me, Emma. You and your lies," he spat, his face contorting with anger. "Lies, James? The only person who ruined your life is you. Your actions have consequences," I retorted. He took a shaky step closer. "Consequences? I've lost everything. My respect, friends, all because of you." I stood my ground. "No, James, it's because of your choices. I simply refuse to be your victim anymore." His expression wavered, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. "You think you're free of me? This isn't over." Before he could say anything more, 2 police officers approached. "Mr. Miller?" one of them asked. James turned, his bravado melting away. "Yes?" "You're under arrest for violating the restraining order. You were warned to stay away from Ms. Miller," the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. James's face turned pale. "Emma, you can stop this. Tell them it's a mistake," he pleaded, panic in his voice. I shook my head. "No, James, this ends now." The officers led him away, and I stood there, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was truly over. Returning to my apartment that evening, I found a letter in the mail. Opening it, I discovered I had been approved for a higher position at work, a promotion. It felt like the universe was giving me a sign that I was on the right path. I called Claire to share the good news, and she was ecstatic. We celebrated with a small dinner at my place, toasting to new beginnings and the end of a dark chapter. That night, I took a moment to reflect on my journey. From the betrayal that shattered my world to the steps I took to rebuild it. I had found strength I didn't know I possessed and had reclaimed my life piece by piece. Walking through the bustling streets the next day, I felt lighter. The weight of past traumas was lifting, replaced by a sense of empowerment and hope. I deserved this new life. A life where my worth was not dictated by someone else's whims. As I turned a corner, I caught a glimpse of someone familiar. James, disheveled and on the edge, standing outside a convenience store, clearly struggling. Our eyes briefly met, but there was no connection left. I walked on, a silent resolve in my heart. James's downfall was complete. My future, bright and full of possibilities, was just beginning. and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time.